Hello, I'm Alan. Welcome to the Guitar Shack. So today's video is a bit different. I'm not dealing with a restoration or a customer guitar. I'm dealing with some kits, specifically gear for music kits of got three Telecasters and then behind me three Stratocasters that are on the wall there. So the story behind these is my wife is involved with a company and they recently did a team building exercise, team building day with some of their colleagues. And one of the tasks that they had to do was to work together to put together some guitar kits. And they did so with, did pretty well, did a good job. Most of them were playable. This one is. Um, but they needed a bit of tweaking, obviously, because why would they not when people have never done them before? So I offered to take them and give them a bit of a setup, check them over, and make sure that they play okay, because then the company's going to pass them on and donate them to some charities. So thought help them out for a good cause. So the kits themselves, I hadn't come across the Gear for Music ones before. I've seen some of the production guitars, and they're kind of functional, basic, but reasonable quality. I think very low level guitars. But this is the first time I come across their kits. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to strip them all down. I've started, so these two Teles I've stripped right down. I'm going to take them all apart and then going to do a couple of things. One is I'm going to put a finish on them because they are bare wood and that will get very grubby very quickly with whoever they pass them on to. I'm going to put the company logo on as a headstock logo, and then I'm going to finish them all in Tru Oil. Um, Partly because it's a very straightforward type of finish that can put on, and it's pretty durable once it's on there. So that's the plan for today. So the first thing I would say is this was the one that had been completely correctly assembled, and it was completely playable. And I have to say, it's really not bad. I mean, these are not expensive kits; they're very affordable, and I think they're a really good way to get into them. But the neck is quite nice. It's sort of C carve, a little bit chunkier than say a Fender Player Series, chunkier than a Squire Affinity or something like that. But it's a nice shape. Um, it's got nice fretwork. They've all got decent frets on them, which I thought they'd be awful. I thought the one thing I'd be doing would be giving them a little bit of fret dressing, but so far so good. Um, I mean, it's all bog standard components. So the Telecaster, it's single coils, it's standard small pots. They turn okay. It's got a switch which switches the three saddle bridge, which is nice. Headstock adjustment on the truss rod, and they've all Strats and Teles have all got the same headstock, which is this slightly more pointy variation on a Fender theme, which is nice. It's attractive enough, and it suits the guitar. So I'm going to strip them all down, and then we'll take it from there. So first things first, having a look at these two, which are already stripped. So you can see that the wood, I think it's Paulonia. It's got a lot of figuring in it. I think that's going to come up quite nicely under the Tru Oil. It's got a slightly grey, almost green tinge to the darker parts of the grain. But I think this is going to pop nicely under a coat of oil. The neck, it's some kind of I'll check the specs, but it's very black. Some kind of hardwood, not sure what. Reasonably closely grained. But as I say, the frets they need a polish, but they're not bad from that point of view. But the fret ends are nicely done, and the headstock is nicely shaped. No finish at all. No finish on the truss rod, I haven't tested to see whether the truss rods actually work, but it's cleanly cut. And the same is true of the body. So if you look at the cavities, there's been a little bit of a knock on the edge, but the actual CNC cutting is clean. And these come with basically everything you need for a foolproof build. So they've got slightly bigger than normal channels through to the cavities, and then the electronics are plug and play. So that's all very straightforward. And the other thing that was interesting is the fit of the necks so far seems pretty good. And one of the reasons for that is they're actually got matching numbers on them. So each one seems to have a matched body and neck, which is a really nice touch. So they do fit nicely. So I think this is going to turn into a really decent guitar. Um, we shall see. Okay, so that's this one stripped. So let's have a look at what we've got components wise. So we've got a plastic wafer switch, which is what you would sort of expect at this kind of level of guitar. We've got small pots, and they feel quite smooth. There's no roughness to them. And when I plugged this one in, this one was working, and there um, wasn't any crackling. The electrics worked fine, so that's good. And then the mechanism for building these is basically you've got these plastic connectors for everything, which makes that life obviously very straightforward and is a great idea for a kit, because it gives people the confidence to build it and do something fun with a guitar which doesn't involve soldering, which is where sometimes the fun factor starts to disappear. It certainly did with me when I was learning how to solder. Um, it is a skill. It does take time, and if you can bypass it completely with a few electrical connectors, that seems like a really good idea to me. Um, they are pretty pretty straightforward where they're going to come from. So if we look at the jack socket, it's an external jack on a curved plate. Um, Cheap but perfectly functional, feels reasonably robust. The pickups are ceramic bars, I'm guessing. They've got a bar magnet at the bottom. Interestingly, the Tele pickup or the Tele bridge pickup has got a brass base, which is feels nice. Be interesting to see how that sounds. That should give it a bit of a twang, and then the hardware for the bridge itself feels quite solid. Um, Nothing much more to say about it. It's a sort of fairly generic 3 saddle bridge, and then the same with the neck pickup. Again, it's a bar magnet, but it's all neatly done. And then we've got a reasonably nice 3-ply black scratch plate with a plastic wrapper on it. So that all goes in the put back together pile. And again, we've got the matching markings on the neck and the body. So that's the 3 Teles done. So next up, I'm going to start on the Strats. So what can I say about the Strats? They are pretty generic. We've got single tone, single volume, so it's slightly simpler than a classical Strat. Um, the neck is the same as on the Teles, and it seems to be the same wood. We've got a trem system, And I think I'm just going to open it up and see what's inside. So if we pull the loaded pick guard, then everything's wired up correctly. We've got standard types of small pots again, perfectly neat, bar magnet ceramic pickups, all very generic. We've got the plastic connector for the output jack, so that works easily. And then there's a very small, slim metal connector for the trem ground. So when I put those back together, I'll probably just put a wee blob of solder on there just to hold them. So very generic, single volumes or volume and single tone. Feels okay. Three-way or three-ply plastics, so that's fine. The bridge itself is possibly the lightest bridge that I've ever come across in my life. I don't know what, some kind of an alloy, I suppose you call it pot metal, but it's very small. That's not going to give you any resonance whatsoever. It's a fairly standard Strat style bridge with block saddles. They're all clean enough. They should set up fine. And then the thing that I was quite impressed by is it's a really nice tight fit on the neck socket again, and or the neck pocket. And interestingly, just the same as Teles have got flat, square heels. Strats have got rounded ones, and they've done that here. So again, I actually thought it was exactly the same necks with the Teles and the Strats, but it's not. It's true to Stratocaster fashion. So that's a nice touch. And again, it's all cleanly routed. It'll take humbuckers on HSH configuration, and that's interesting because I think you probably find that people, if you were to build one of these kits as your first foray into doing work on your own guitars, I think you'll probably end up with a nice playable guitar. It'll teach you how to set it up, but B, it also gives you the option for doing a bit of upgrading because this looks to my eye like it would take pretty much a standard Stratocaster pick guards, and if you wanted to upgrade the pickups to a different configuration. So again, that's nice and future proof for somebody who wants to get into messing with these. So just to put my money where my mouth is, this is just one of many Strat pick guards that I've got on hanging on the wall. So would that fit? Well, it would fit. The holes won't line up, but it would fit the neck. And with the bridge in place, yeah, that'll work. In fact, quite a good few of these holes actually would line up. So yeah, that's definitely an option. So if you bought one of these and you wanted to upgrade it with a different pickguard, as many people will, or indeed a different configuration of pickups, then this is a good option. And on the same principle, given it's got a standard Stratocaster neck heel, there's an old Squire Strat Affinity neck that I've got lying around. That'll go straight in and it'll fit neatly as well. It's not quite as good a fit. There's a little bit of gap around the bottom, but I reckon that would give you an upgrade path if you wanted to use this body on something else, or indeed use that neck on something else. And then while we're on such shenanigans, so here is a Tele body, and then here is a standard Player Series Fender neck, which again fits. So there you go. If anybody ever wants to fit a Fender's neck to a Gear for Music body, the answer is yes, it will work. Might question why you would want to do that, but there you go. So that's the strip down complete. So I'm going to give them a little bit of a rub down, and then I'm going to start putting a finish on them. I'm going to use Tru Oil, mainly because I want to protect the wood. They seem to be unfinished. There might be some kind of a sealer coat on them, but it's not obvious. But you know, they would get pretty grubby pretty quickly in use. So really just some oil to seal up the wood, and then that will make them, make them a bit more durable. So that's me at the halfway point. So these bodies have now had 4 coats of Tru Oil, and you can really see the grain starting to pop nicely, and you can also see there's just starting to build up a bit of a sheen. So basically the process is I start off with a deep coat and let it, or a fairly thick coat, and let it soak in. Then I do a couple of coats where I basically wet sand it with some oil and some sandpaper, and that builds up a bit of a slurry, which then allows the oil and the wood shavings to become a grain filler effectively. So that's been 4 coats like that, and then I'm going to sand this back just very lightly with a fairly fine sandpaper, just to knock off any high spots, and then probably 2 more coats just straight applied with the Tru Oil, and then that should get a nice sort of soft satiny sheen. Same with the necks. So I've applied the decals, I've sealed them under a coat of the Tru Oil, and these necks have now had, I think, 3, maybe 4 coats. So I'm just going to just lightly sand them just to take off any roughness, and then maybe 1 or 2 more coats on that. So you can see it's a pretty straightforward process, and it doesn't give you a kind of factory gloss finish, but what it does do is give you a nice sealed finish, which is nice to play on, seals up the wood and brings out the colour nicely. So it's a really good option if you're building a kit guitar, because it doesn't take any skill whatsoever to come up with a finish which is attractive and durable at the end. So here are the finished articles, a Strat body and a Tele body. So these have had 6 coats of Tru Oil. So as you can see, it's got a bit of a sheen to it. It's still got the grain showing, which is, you know, what you want to achieve with this. And I just think it's a really good finish to use on one of these guitar kits, because it looks decent, but brings out the wood nicely, and it's very easy to use. It's not toxic, it doesn't need any special tools or equipment, and it's a great way to do one of these kits. And then similarly on the necks, so on the headstocks I put a couple of extra coats on where I had put the decal on, so they're a bit shinier. But on the back of the necks, it's got this kind of semi-gloss finish. It's quite smooth, but what I'll do is I'll just give it a very light rub over with some very, very fine sandpaper, and then I'll wax it, and it'll give you a really nice, smooth, playable neck. So again, same thing, easy to do and good result, and it looks pretty cool when it's put together. So as you can see, I've been over all the necks with the fret rocker, and the good news is that once again, I'm very impressed with the quality of the necks on these kits. No major rocks, nothing that needs to be addressed. It's all quite minor stuff, and it will easily set up okay. And that's good news, because I was a bit concerned about whether to make these playable I would have to do anything to them which would be beyond the scope of the average kit builder. And the answer is no, I don't. So that's good news. So all I'm going to do with them is to polish the frets and then condition the fretboards and then get them all reassembled. So here's the first two necks. Frets have been polished up with my Dremel. Now you don't need to use a Dremel, you can use 4/0 wire wool and it'll do exactly the same thing, just takes a little bit longer, and I've got 6 of these to get through. And then I've fed the board with Monte Presso, which is really good sort of waxy substance that you put onto the fingerboard. It feeds it and it gives it a nice finish, and as you can see, these have darkened up a little bit but come out with a nice sheen to them. So these are done, ready to go back on, and then crack on with the next ones. Okay, so next up I'm just going to fit the tuners. So very straightforward, standard tuners that you find on lots of guitars. So if you've fitted tuners before, it's a very familiar process. You just put them in from the back and then put in the bits from the front to secure them. You screw into each other and then you locate it from rotating around the place by putting in a little screw on the back. I'm going to start with one of the Telecasters because, well, that's what Leo Fender did. So I've got the basic components. So I've got the bridge assembly with its connector. I've got the switch. So I've got the actual switch connections to the pickups. I've got the output, and then I've got the so it's going to be the neck pickup, I guess, and then the red one's going to be the bridge. Okay, and then I've got a spare earth lead, which is going to go through and under the bridge, which I think needs to be a bit more exposed, so I'll do that. So basically, I'm just going to start by feeding things through. So bridge connection goes through there, or the earth connection goes through there. Got the output jack, which obviously feeds into the back. couple in just to hold it in place. I don't know if some of these holes have been pre-drilled as part of the kit, or whether it was part of what the people on the task did. So I'm going to connect up the output. So they're a one-way fit, so that should be secure. Then I'm going to put on the pick guard. So the pick guard comes pre-fitted with the neck pickup, which has got plastic around it, so I'm going to remove that, since if I don't remove that now, it'll probably stay there forevermore. Okay, so I'm going to feed the connection through for the neck pickup. Just need to get the wires relatively straight to feed through the hole. It's quite a long hole through from a bridge of a Tele. So there we go, that's that one in. So what I'm just going to do is put in a couple of pick guard screws just to hold that in place for now. It voila. So black to black. Oh sorry, black and white to black and white. And again, it's a one-way fit, so you can only connect in one direction, which is good. And then the last wire to go through is the bridge connection. There we go. I'm just going to make sure my earth is hooked on. It is. So there is a bridge. So bridge connection on. Just tuck this in place. Quite a lot of wires. I might try and feed them more neatly before I close it up, but let's just do a quick test. So do we have a live Telecaster? We do. So yep, so that's all live. So I'm going to feed that in a little bit more neatly, and then we're going to zip her up, and that is how you build the Tele. So I'll just put the bridge screws in. So a little bit easier on the Tele kit, obviously, because there's no trem, but in reality a Strat trem's not exactly complicated to fit. The bit that's more challenging is balancing it so that the trem works nicely. So I guess that most people building the kit, if you're a beginner, will just deck the trem. Okay, have a bridge. I like the vintage style bridge. It's not an ashtray, it doesn't have sides on it, but it's got a 3-barrel saddles, which is good. Makes a proper Telecaster in my book. And those holes are line up as well. So let's just see where can we go with these wires. I don't want to twist the connectors too much, so I'm going to feed Some of them are a little bit further back into the cavity itself, although that suggests that it's pushing it around a bit. So if I just fold them neatly along the sides, that should also work as long as nothing's trapped. To be fair, this is standard Telecaster fare. It's not any different on this one than it is on a more expensive one. So the holes line up, which is good. Because this has been pre-assembled, when I'm putting the screws in, the trick is to turn them backwards until you feel them drop into the thread that's already there, and that way you avoid, and then you can tighten it up in the thread without cutting a new one, which is just good for longevity. This Paulonia wood is actually relatively soft, so you don't want to be taking things off and on too often, but as long as you're careful about catching the threads, then it should be okay. Okay, so the neck bolts are the connection between the neck and the body. It's one of the most important structural connections, and some guitars don't have bolts, they have a set neck, which can give you greater sustain, greater transmission of frequencies from the neck to the body. On the other hand, Fenders have always used the 4-bolt system, well, 3 bolts in the 70s, and it's never been a problem. The key is making sure that you've got a decent connection and that the fit of the body in the neck is nice and snug. Now this is one of the things which I liked about these kits, is the fact that there's matching numbers of the body with the neck to show that somebody's found the best fit and put the bits together in the kit. Okay, so this is alive. It needs a full setup, which is what I'm going to give it. But that's how you build one of these Telecasters. So, I mean, I can't say anything about the playing experience at the moment because it needs a setup. But the neck feels okay. It feels quite nice. It went together easily enough. It's going to keep going out of tune until the strings bed in. It's just a matter of stretching them and keeping tuning them until they settle, which I'll do as part of the setup. But overall, nice and straightforward, didn't take me long at all, and I think well within the capabilities of anyone who wants to have a go at building their own guitar. So next up, we're going to build up one of the Stratocasters, which is very, very similar process. In some ways, it's actually simpler. So on the pickguard for these, the design is different. So all the pickups are mounted on the main pickguard, which means there's only actually this bridge, the ground wire, and then this wire which goes through to the output jack. So that's easier. The thing that's slightly more complicated is that we need to fit the bridge or the tremolo system, which is pretty straightforward. The way it works is that the trem block itself sits in this cavity, and then it hinges or it pivots on a row of screws here, and it's then held by the bottom end of it. It's got springs in it which sit up here, and then they attach to this, what's known as a claw here. So the basic process for these is you want these in tight enough so that these will hinge against them, and the way you do that is you tighten it until it lifts, and then you back it half a turn. So you do that with all of them. So as I said, there's only the 2 wires on the Strat, which makes life a lot easier. So put the ground wire through there, it'll come out the back, and this one goes through to the output jack, like so, and then these will just drop on. So I'm just going to pin this in place with a couple of the screws just so that it won't fall out. Okay, that's that. And then we're going to connect up these 2 wires, which have got a little clip system. And then there's a white plastic cover that goes on there after you've strung it up. And then I'm going to clip in the output jack. Nice and easy with there's only one way that this actually fits, so you can't get it wrong, so that's good industrial design. Sounds nice and quiet. So Strat's got a 5-way switch, so neck and middle, middle only, bridge and middle, bridge only. So that's all fine. Volume and master tone. So one of the things that's different about this from a normal Strat is that it's got a single tone control, which isn't really a problem for me. It just makes the guitar slightly simpler. So I'm going to go ahead and zip up this and then fit the neck, which is exactly the same process as you saw with the Telecasters. So I'm going to just do that on fast forward. So here is the end result. I've got behind me, I've got 3 Strats and 3 Teles. And I think overall it's been a really positive experience building these up. I hadn't really built a kit before. Um, I've actually got a Harley Benton Jazzmaster kit somewhere which I was intending to build, and then never get around to it because I bought an actual Jazzmaster body and then built one up from there. So that's still sitting in a box in the loft. But I was intrigued to see how they would go together and what the experience would be like, particularly for somebody who's approaching this, who, it's a first step into building guitars. And I have to say that they're really good. I mean, I think they're £66 each, both the Strat and the Tele. So you're getting an awful lot for your money, I have to say. I think so. What can I say about them? I think they went together really well, really easy. The instructions were very clear. The wiring system with quick lock connectors is really good. It makes it very straightforward for anybody to put one of these together. And I think from that point of view, they'd be a really good way for somebody to get into, understanding how an electric guitar goes together. The overall quality is surprisingly good, actually. The necks in particular, I didn't expect much from, bearing in mind that these are £66 for the entire kit. Um, the reality is that the only one which there was only one which needed any fretwork. Now, with a caveat that I approached this from the point of view of just building it up as an average customer would do. So I didn't want to do any fretwork if I didn't need to. I didn't want to level them or do any of the kind of more in-depth work that I would normally do when building up a guitar from parts. And I took the approach that said when I did the setup, I did it to Fender specs. So I set them all at 10 thou neck relief and 4/64ths as a standard on the action. And I was able to set all of them except one up to that spec, which is a fairly standard kind of spec, and play buzz free. So that's really good. One of the Stratocasters, it might even have been this one, had one fret that just needed to be spot leveled in order to get it playable at a standard kind of setup. I actually prefer the outcome with the Teles for sort of several reasons. One is the body is just a bit more substantial. And I think the more basic nature of a Telecaster uh, suits this kind of finish and this level of finish better. There's something slightly roughy tufty about a Telecaster, and I think this suits that vibe nicely. The pickups are got a nice Tele grill. The neck's fine as well. Bit more refined. And then spanky or balanced in the middle. So that's fine. I mean, it sounds like a Telecaster should. They're not the best pickups, but they're not terrible either. So overall, I think that Tele, this is the winner. Same issues with the tuners. Don't want to be too damning about them because the whole thing costs £66, and I think the reality is that once they are strung up and tuned up, they adjust easily. A little bit gritty, don't feel the best, but you can certainly get nicer feeling, more consistent tuners for not that much money, and that would be the thing I would do if I was going to go further than what's in the kit. Probably the next step after that would be, again, from a learning experience point of view, more than anything else, I would say get some better pickups and then wire them in and learn to solder and do that kind of work. Not because it particularly needs it as an entry level guitar, but because it could benefit from it. The neck, I'd say, is good enough that with this neck and this body, with decent pickups and better tuners, is pretty tasty little low cost guitar that you could quite happily have as your as a second guitar, backup guitar, just something to mess around on, and it would be credible. So I do like the Telecaster version more. I think as an experience, these are more about learning about how the guitar goes together than they are about being your first guitar, I would suggest. If you don't know much about guitars, you're just learning, you'd probably, I think, be better off buying a pre-built factory one. And I dare say that this isn't significantly different or better or worse than some of the low cost entry level Strats and Teles you can get for around about the £150 mark. Um, but I think cheapest Squire Teles are about £130 in the UK. So if you just want to learn to play guitar, I think that would be a more complete product. It would be better finished. Um, Whether it actually sounds better or plays better, I can't say. I don't have one. I haven't played one of that level for quite some time. The last low cost, I had I had a Squire Stratocaster Affinity, which was I think cost £60 in second hand about a year ago. And it was a HSS Strat, and it was a nicer playing and feeling guitar than Stratocaster version of this is. So as a player instrument, I would say probably go Squire. But as something to learn on, fantastic. You know, these are a good way into it. So it's really what is it you want to learn. So that's my take on kit guitars. Big thank you to Turnaround Publishing for giving me a load of guitars to play with. As a ex HR director, I heartily approve of the concept of using guitar building as a team building exercise. I wish I'd thought of that when I was making people do all kinds of weird crap back in the day when I was doing that sort of thing. Then I think that's quite fun, and the the outputs ranged from one of them was perfectly set up and well perfectly assembled anyway, to one was needed everything doing. But I think by taking them all apart, putting a finish on them, I've got them all up to standard where they're decent, they're playable, they sound okay, and I think the fact they're going to be passing them on to some schools now, which is great. So hopefully some youngsters will get the opportunity to learn and play a bit on guitar. Hopefully point them in the right direction for a life of strumming. And I think these are a good entry level guitar for them to play on. Certainly in terms of playability and in terms of sound, um, these play nicely, and they're a mile better than the things that I used to learn on 40 odd years ago when I was doing that. So hopefully they will help some youngsters start that journey. Okay, enough of me wittering on. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Uh, we'll see you back in the shack sometime soon.